Have you ever met this guy? In anyone's experience on the internet, one is bound to meet this guy. A proponent of scientism. Basically, given long enough, we're all bound to meet someone who thinks that, quote, other than true science, nothing else is knowable about reality, end quote. Now, other than being a quirky belief that is surprisingly common today on the internet, what else can we say about it? Is it true? What are its implications? Is it an invitation to touch some grass? Well, today we're here to find out, so stick around to the end of this video. So, this slogan of nothing but science as knowledge can be summed up as the term scientism, and this usually takes place on discussions about God. Specifically, a context could come about something like this. Let's say someone says, hey, I just encountered a pretty cool argument for God's existence. I think you should check it out. But it is then retorted by someone that, arguments are not evidence. I think it accomplishes nothing. Because I only accept things that science shows are true. Well, there are two ways to interpret this saying. First, it could be simply an idiosyncratic preference that they only accept arguments and evidence from one discipline or one set of disciplines to the arbitrary detriment of others, akin to someone only accepting arguments from, let's say, only left-handed people. And if you're right-handed, in principle, they will not accept the argument. This would of course be quite silly and capture only perhaps a minority of people. So, being charitable here, we might say instead that instead of a preference, it is what philosophers call an epistemic limitation. Epistemology refers to the study of the nature, origin, and scope of knowledge. Epistemic justification, the rationality of belief, and various related issues. Meaning to say, it's the study of how someone comes to believe anything at all. Or rather, comes to know anything at all. So, let's say someone comes to believe in the shape of the earth being round through eating a fortune cookie. That would be a form of epistemology, just not a very good one. So, what the person defending scientism is saying here is that epistemologically, humans can only access truth through running through the rigors of the scientific method. Notice here, the proponent of scientism is at once speaking for all humans and all knowledge in principle, a burden of proof which we shall hold him accountable for. Of course, the proponent of scientism could simply be talking about himself, that he is only speaking for himself. But then one might ask the very valid question, why is it that that person is so uniquely epistemologically blinded to reality except through the scientific method, unlike everyone else? I mean, everyone else seems to be engaging with reality just fine through various academic disciplines like philosophy and history, which, while not reducible to the physical sciences, are indeed legitimate pathways to truth and reality. So why are they so exceptionally and uniquely blind? So, if not, then we shall hold them accountable to their very own claim that only science can lead to knowledge. So it doesn't really need to be said, but most people you'll encounter on the internet who defend scientism are new atheists, who in following their thought leaders saying stuff like,
and maybe I'm a heathen for saying it, but I just don't think there's any form of knowledge except empirical knowledge.
and end up really believing them. But believing it because a bunch of famous people on the internet saying so is simply the fallacy known as the argument from authority. So we shall evaluate it on its own merits. So it is helpful for us that a pretty famous philosopher named Edward Feser has written a post on the topic, which is further detailed in his book, The Last Superstition, which I highly recommend everyone check out. Essentially, the incoherence of scientism can be shown in a dilemma like this. Scientism is either self-defeating or trivially true. So from here on, I will be quoting Fraser. Quote, "The claim that scientism is true is not itself a scientific claim, not something that can be established using scientific methods. Indeed, that science is even a rational form of inquiry, let alone the only rational form of inquiry, is not something that can be established scientifically. For scientific inquiry itself rests on a number of philosophical assumptions, that there is an objective world external to the minds of scientists, that the world is governed by causal regularities, that the human intellect can uncover and accurately describe these regularities, and so forth. Since science presupposes these things, it cannot attempt to justify them without arguing in a circle. And if it cannot even establish that it is a reliable form of inquiry, it can hardly establish that it is the only reliable form. Both tasks would require getting outside science altogether and discovering from the extra scientific vantage point that science conveys an accurate picture of reality, and in the case of scientism, that only science does so. The rational investigation of the philosophical presuppositions of science has, naturally, traditionally been regarded as the province of philosophy. Nor is it that these presuppositions alone that philosophy examines. There is also the question of how to interpret what science tells us about the world. For example, is the world fundamentally comprised of substances or events? What is it to be a cause? Is there only one kind? Aristotle held that there are at least four. What is the nature of the universe referred to in scientific laws? Concepts like quarks, electrons, atoms, and so on. And indeed in language in general. Do they exist over and above the particular things that instantiate them? Scientific findings can shed light on such metaphysical questions, but can never really fully answer them. Yet if science must depend upon philosophy both to justify its presuppositions and to interpret its results, the falsity of scientism seems doubly assured. As the conservative philosopher John Kirk, himself a confirmed secularist like Derbyshire and MacDonald's, conclude, hence, philosophy and not science is a stronger candidate for being the very paradigm of rationality. So, we come here to the second horn of the dilemma facing scientism. Its advocates may now insist, if philosophy has this status, it must really be a part of science, since, he continues to maintain, digging in his heels, all rational inquiry is scientific inquiry. The trouble now is that scientism becomes completely trivial, arbitrarily redefining science so that it includes anything that could be put forward as evidence against it. Worse, it makes scientism consistent with views that are supposed to be incompatible with it. For example, a line of thought deriving from Aristotle and developed with great sophistication from Thomas Aquinas holds that when we work out what it is for one thing to be the cause of another, we are inexorably led to the existence of an uncaused cause outside time and space which continually sustain the causal regularity studied by science, and apart from which they could not in principle exist even for a moment. If scientism is defined so broadly that it includes, at least in principle, philosophical theology of this kind, then the view becomes completely vacuous, for the whole point of scientism, or so it would seem given the rhetoric of its loudest adherents, was supposed to be to provide a weapon by which fields of inquiries like theology might be dismissed as inherently unscientific and irrational. In order to see how easily this would play out, one really only needs to see this debate between Dr. William Lane Craig and Peter Atkins.
And do you deny that science cannot account for everything?
Yes, I do deny that science
So what can't it account for?
Well, had you brought that up in the debate, I had a number of examples that I was going to give. I think there are a good number of things that cannot be scientifically proven, but that we're all rational to accept. Let me list five. Logical and mathematical truths cannot be proven by science. Science presupposes logic and math, so that to try to prove them by science would be arguing in a circle. Metaphysical truths like there are other minds other than my own, or that the external world is real, or that the past was not created 5 minutes ago with an appearance of age, are rational beliefs that cannot be scientifically proven. Ethical beliefs about statements of value are not accessible by the scientific method. You can't show by science whether the Nazi scientists in the camps did anything evil as opposed to the scientists in Western democracies. Aesthetic judgments, number 4, cannot be accessed by the scientific method because the beautiful, like the good, cannot be scientifically proven. And finally, most remarkably, would be science itself. Science cannot be justified by the scientific method. Science is permeated with unprovable assumptions. For example, in the special theory of relativity, the whole theory hinges on the assumption that the speed of light is constant in a one-way direction between any 2 points A and B. But that strictly cannot be proven. We simply have to assume that in order to hold to the theory.
That's the wrong number!
And from this, we are really able to see the defeat of scientism really easily because it either is self-defeating or trivially true. There are many legitimate pathways to knowledge about reality, and yet scientism insists that only science is the only legitimate and rational form of inquiry. Well, from this, we see that it is because science itself presupposes many different disciplines. It itself is either, dependent on these views, and so scientism is either self-defeating, or in order to account for that, they include these disciplines as scientific disciplines, such as philosophical theology, then it is trivially true because it is no weapon against really any of the arguments from natural theology at all. So, from this, we can really see how scientism is easily defeated. Amongst most philosophers today, the vast majority of which, scientism is considered a dead position. And just like them, we ought to really reject it. If you like and agree and want to see more of this content, be sure to like and subscribe for more.